It's the conversation for this Thursday, the 17th of April. My name is Blaise Bryant. It is the alumni edition of The Conversation. The first half of the show, I have Denise DiNoto here in studio. She is the communications specialist for consumer-directed choices. She graduated here from the College of St. Rose in 1995. And in a couple of months, her term as president of the Alumni Association will be coming to an end. And she was also on the search committee for announcing the 11th president of the College of St. Rose, Dr. Carolyn Stefanko. And it's always great to talk to Denise. Thank you so much for taking the time. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Denise, the pleasure is mine. So, obviously the big news is the announcement of Dr. Stefanko as the 11th president of the college. Since you were on the committee, and now you can make statements because everything has been announced, what separated Dr. Stefanko from the other members of the other candidates, I should say?
Well, first let me say that we had so many good candidates, and it was such a pleasure to see so many people enthusiastic about St. Rose. But I think that Dr. Stefanko brought a grace to the interview sessions, and she definitely brings a lot of international experience and a strong background in education. And I think that those will really help her stand out as she assumes her role here.
And she will be coming July 1st. You, I have to say, were the only guest that I have had in the almost 3 months of doing the show that asked to come on the show, which is a compliment, and I thank you for that. And you want to talk about how alumni can stay connected. You, as I mentioned in the introduction, graduated from St. Rose in 1995. How did you end up here?
I came to St. Rose in my junior year of high school, and the minute I stepped on campus, I felt like it was home. There was just something about the community, something about the friendliness of everyone. It was a small school. I used a wheelchair, and the campus was accessible and easy for me to independently move around in. And so I just felt like it was important for me to go to a school where I was not just a number, where people knew who I was. The service component was also very important to me. I wanted to be at a school that valued giving back to the community. That was a large part of how I was raised. And so it just felt like home to me the minute I stepped on campus. And that's why I've continued to become involved as an alum, because St. Rose continues to feel like home, even though I no longer live here.
Right. You got your degree in communication sciences and disorders, which I'm sure that's partly because you do use a wheelchair, which has ultimately led you to the position that you are now in terms of being the communication specialist at Consumer Directed Choices, right?
Yes. And actually, when I started here, I started as a special ed major and then looked at public communications and then ended up in speech therapy, communication sciences and disorders. I wanted to do something that would allow an appreciation of language, which has always been something very important to me, and something that was a helping profession where I could do for others. And I worked in clinical life for 10 years and used my degree every day. And then I went to work in public health for 7 years. And now I'm working for a small nonprofit, Consumer Directed Choices. We promote self-determination and independence for people with disabilities and support people with disabilities who use consumer-directed personal assistance for their home care. So we're a little different than a traditional nursing agency. A lot of times people think about home care and they think of, the Eddy or the visiting nurses, and there's nothing wrong with those organizations. They're great organizations. But consumers who use our program are their own employers. So I joke that I am the CEO of me, and I get to be in charge of personnel. So I recruit, hire, train, supervise, and manage the personal assistants who work for me. And the agency that I work for, Consumer Directed Choices, acts as a fiscal intermediary. We provide payroll, timesheets, wages, benefits, workers' comp, disability, all of the things that an employer would have to provide that I, as a person with a disability, don't want to have to worry about. So I get to have control over who helps me, and the company I work for does all of the, money end of the deal that I don't want to have to deal with.
It must be nice to have control over who helps you.
Absolutely. It's critical. Think about it. If you needed help every day with things like going to the bathroom, taking a shower, cooking your food, doing your laundry, wouldn't you want to have a say in who is providing that care?
Absolutely. I don't know a person that wouldn't want that sort of say.
Right. So we have 500 consumers that use our agency who have decided that they want to use consumer-directed personal assistance. And those 500 consumers employ about 850 personal assistants in the Greater Capital Region.
Wow, that is amazing. I did not even know that sort of thing existed. As I mentioned earlier, you have been the president of the Alumni Association for the last 4 years?
Yes, 4 years.
Which is how I got to know Denise. I was president of the Student Alumni Association. That's how we got to know each other. Your experience in the workforce, how has that helped you be a successful president of the Alumni Association?
Well, my experiences at work taught me that you have to be open to collaboration with other people, and you have to be willing to listen to views that may not necessarily be your own. There's creativity in numbers. So when you gather a group of people together around a table and open up the floor to hear what everybody has to say, oftentimes you find ideas that you never even could conceive of on your own. And sometimes they're really great ideas that make sense. And with everybody having an equal voice, you have the option to hear more than you would on your own. So I've really tried to be a collaborative president. I've tried to lead by example, doing service works. And also, it's not been pretty, the work that we've done the past 4 years that are related to policy and procedure. But, the Alumni Association is a nonprofit organization, and we've really tried to strengthen the policies and procedures that guide us as our own independent nonprofit so that we're in a stronger place now than we were when I started 4 years ago.
And that brings me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. It seems that for varying reasons, and I would say most of them are due to the harsh and rough economy, it's not always an easy thing for alumni to give back. How have you been trying to help in terms of strengthening the endowment and alumni donations?
Sure. Giving back doesn't just have to mean financial support. Giving back can take many forms. In order to be on the National Board of Directors of the Alumni Association, there is no financial requirement. It's not one of those boards that you have to give a certain amount of money in order to be considered for the board. And while we encourage everyone to support the college, we know that support takes many forms. So if you are not able to financially help the college, you can serve as a volunteer recruitment assistant with admissions. Or, when they travel to do student events out of state, if you live in another state, you can serve as an ambassador for your alma mater, and you can hook up with admissions when they travel. You can serve as a volunteer at Accepted Student Days. We just had one this past Saturday, and some of our alumni representatives attended to speak to incoming students about their experiences. You can join in through Reach Out St. Rose activities and give back as part of continuing a day of service. So while financial support is really important, it's not necessary. As an alumni board, we try to kickstart the philanthropy each year by giving a gift to the annual fund in recognition of all of the members of the graduating class. So, for instance, this year, I don't know how many students are graduating next month in May, but the Alumni Association will be making a $1 donation in the name of every graduating student from the college. So the participation rate for the graduating class will be 100%. So I'm hopeful that by starting that participation, everybody will be encouraged to then continue it, a year out from graduation. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. We give $1 in your name when you graduate. If you can give $2 on your second year out and $3 on your third year out, after a while, you'll be able to give a little more.
Sure, because ideally, us seniors will be in the workforce doing what we have studied, hopefully, and if it's not what we studied, something new.
And it doesn't have to be what you studied. I mean, I'm not practicing speech therapy right now, but I'm doing something I'm passionate about. And my education from St. Rose definitely gave me a good foundation to build on so that I could do other professional activities.
Absolutely. So, in terms of staying connected to the college, how has social media done in terms of allowing alumni to stay connected to St. Rose?
We have seen social media play a more important role with some of our young alums. Now that you have joined, you will be joining the graduates of the last decade group, the Gold group, and there are special alumni events for young alums, and we use social media a great deal to reach out to them and engage them. The alumni office has a Facebook page, and we regularly post events to them. There is a LinkedIn group for alumni of the college, and we know that there are discussions that happen among alumni when there's job openings or professional networking opportunities. So we've tried to meet people where they're at. Gone are the days where alums will come to chapter events and meet over lunch. Some alums still do that with our Schenectady chapter and our Capital Region chapter, but more and more, our alumni are traveling across the country and across the world. So having access to social media platforms makes it easier for them to connect with other people, no matter where they are.
And it really is quite remarkable. And as someone who has been in Alumni Association board meetings, to see such a diverse group that sits on the board, which I think is really helpful for the college in general.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we're getting ready to celebrate our 100th anniversary. And so if you think about the years that have gone by and the legacy of alumni involvement, I mean, I know that I've been a figurehead, but there are 37,000 people standing behind me that I represent, and I've taken that responsibility very seriously. And I think it's important to gather a diverse range of opinions when you're trying to debate an issue such as sponsorship for a student activity or a college event. And it's important to hear from, graduates from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, graduates from all of the 4 colleges and schools. That's really important because it brings a more well-rounded discussion to the table.
Absolutely. Denise, I say this not because you're in the studio, but because I really do feel this way. You have done a great job, and as someone that has seen firsthand the work that you do, and I want to thank you so much for taking a few minutes with me here on The Conversation. It's always great to catch up with you.
Thank you so much, Blaise. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine. Okay, so coming up in 15 seconds, we will remember Boston with someone who is covering it from the Capital Region. That's next on The Conversation. Welcome back to the second half of the conversation, and as I said, it is the alumni edition, and we remember Boston simultaneously. A year ago, Tuesday, the Boston bombings hit the Boston Marathon, and I'm on the phone with Antonio Caban, who at the time was a producer for News 10 ABC here in Albany. Antonio has since taken a producer job at WHGH 7 NBC Boston, and he did a great job with the team here in the Capital Region covering the bombings a year ago. He graduated from St. Rose in 2012, and it is always great to have my good friend Antonio Caban on the program. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes, Antonio. It's always appreciated.
Absolutely. It's great to hear from you again.
Absolutely. So let's cut right to the chase here. Where were you when you found out about the bombings in Boston?
So it was obviously that Marathon Monday last year, and I remember where I was in the newsroom. I was sitting across from my executive producer, and that day I had been tasked with taking over for the 4 o'clock show, so producing the 4 o'clock show. And the first bomb went off at about 2:49 p.m. And at that point, I had gotten my show pretty much set and together. And my assignment editor shouts across the newsroom that they're talking on Twitter about a bombing at the finish line, possibly 2. And all of us at once, I'll be honest, we did not react to it as something, as a serious matter. I mean, very often times on Twitter, there's a lot of buzz, but sometimes it doesn't actually, it's either fabricated or it just doesn't turn out to be anything at all. But this was not the case. So a couple of minutes after we all kind of brushed it off, we got the official announcement from ABC News over the loudspeaker. And then the visuals started coming in, and I've, in my entire journalistic career, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to shed those images from my mind. What I saw.
For sure. And let's not forget, you were just getting your feet wet as a producer at News 10 ABC.
Absolutely. It was probably at this point officially as a titled producer for about 4 months. I had produced before, but this is the time that I had the full title and an actual show that was dedicated to, that I was responsible for.
Certainly.
So it's a little different. You walk into it with a different mind. That's for sure.
And what did you do? How did you deploy the troops? How did you assemble the team, the coverage team, to cover everything that was going on?
It's very interesting in the world of, especially in the world of TV, because I always think of it as what they teach you in school. They can never prepare you enough for whatever situation that you're going to come across. So every situation that you respond to with breaking news is always going to be a little different. With this particular one, how serious it was, ABC ended up taking over as far as like our coverage on our television. We allowed ABC as a special report to come on air. But in the background, we were formulating plans as information and development started coming in about the victim and bombings and what was going on in the city of Boston, because it was not only, and the chaos in the newsroom, I'm sure, was the same across the country. We immediately focused on what reporters were coming in that night, who had contacts with people in Boston, who could we get on the phone that could possibly give us any witnesses that could have given us a sense of what was going on the ground. And then most of all, we were also concerned with any possible Capital Region residents that were there running in the marathon. Boston is very close to Albany, so I almost feel that it hit home for us. It hit home for us too. But as a journalist, you need to focus, you need to hunker down, and you need to get the story, figure out what's going on in the story and like you said, deploy the troops. So as soon as we found out who was coming in and who had contacts, we immediately sent them out to Boston.
No one got hurt that was running from the capital region, right?
Not that I know of. Not that we were able to determine. I know there were capital region residents that were in Boston, either as a spectator or runners, but not to my knowledge were any of them actually affected by the bombing itself.
So obviously, I mean, you guys did great work, getting great stuff. I mean, which every single capital region station did, whether it's radio or TV that covers news. So now that you are down in Boston, the other day we had the 1-year tributes. What did you guys do that was different from the other media outlets in Boston to cover the tributes?
What we did in general, we actually started our projects a couple of months ahead of time. We had reporters and anchors go out and interview those who were very intricate to either catching the suspected bomber that fateful Friday, and then we also spoke to the victims as victims' families. We spoke to the survivors, which is what we focused a lot of our pieces on, were the survivors. I'm not too familiar with how others in our market, produced their stuff, but we titled ours as Boston Remembers. And we focused a lot of our coverage, like I said, on the survivors and how are they doing this day. How are they doing as we approach the marathon anniversary. It was very important because Boston, if you've never lived in Boston or if you've never been in Boston before, it is one of the sixth most populated cities in the country. However, it acts like a small town. Everybody here is a neighbor to each other, and that's one thing that I noticed when I got here. So when we went out and we started doing our stories, our reporters and our anchors, and everybody was very touched by what was going on, was affected by what was going on. So in a way, our anchors and our reporters going out and talking to the survivors and those who went through the ordeal, we all shared that commonality. We went through it together as Bostonians. Right,
and you talked about the small town atmosphere that Boston has. It's a smaller city than if you've never been there, it seems like.
Yeah, it is. It's a very small, tight-knit community. One thing that stood out from the tributes that I was watching the other day on our station was that the executive director of the Boston Athletic Association referred to those who unfortunately lost their lives that day and that week as neighbors rather than victims, because that's what they were.
Wow.
Everybody is so connected in some way, shape, or form. Just for an example, Governor Deval Patrick, when he was running for governor, one of the victims, Martin Richard, was 2 years old at the time, and there was a picture on the Richards family mantle of Martin Richard holding one of Deval Patrick's signs.
Wow.
Our mayor now is Mayor Marty Walsh, and he is also a Dorchester native, just like Martin Richard. And Mayor Marty Walsh said he was going through pictures, and he noticed that he had his arm around a little boy in one of the pictures, and it turns out to be Martin Richard. So it's a very small world type of situation here in Boston. Everybody is a neighbor, and everybody is affected. Some would connect it or draw some similarities to 9/11 in New York. But I feel that New York is what's more spread out than Boston is. And I feel the sense of community here. You can tell. And you can understand, too, when I was watching the coverage with all of our talent across the board, across the the news realm here, all the broadcasters, they were affected emotionally, physically. They might have known somebody who runs the marathon. The marathon has been going on for years, decades. This is a tradition that was unfortunately shattered by two individuals.
But the marathon, it is happening Monday. There are some different security measures being implemented. Why don't you talk about some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that they do have in place is at the finish line, the actual finish line itself, it's going to be a lot harder as a spectator to be there. There is going to be way heightened security. Boston police have been out and about all week long, and unfortunately there was actually an incident last night where a suspect, a male, was arrested after he claimed to police that there was a rice cooker in his backpack and they had to detonate it. He was arraigned in court today, but that's just a very good example of how vigilant police are staying. They are on top of it from the start line to the finish line. Cameras have been put in place, and from what I've been hearing from the police commissioner, everything is going to go off well. Is what they're anticipating. They say that this is a family event, and it is. It will always be a family event. And they just say this year they're taking things a lot more seriously. Security is of the utmost priority, and to make sure that everybody's safe.
Absolutely. I have about 2 more minutes here. So people oftentimes, when they hear about heightened security, there is this general sense of discontent. And one of the most recent examples of that is the Super Bowl at MetLife Stadium. People were complaining about how parking is going to be limited and how you can't bring coolers in, so on and so forth. What is the sense in Boston in terms of the heightened security in the marathon?
I think that the marathon has been going on for so long that ever since last year had happened, any sense of, of allowing those runners and those spectators to feel more comfortable has been well received. Yes, there are things that you cannot bring. There are limits to what you can and cannot bring in to the spectator on the route. But I think that for the most part, those out there understand why that's needed.
Okay, well, that's great. I mean, it's one of those things that kind of came to mind because as I mentioned earlier, that things really in people in general don't always like some sort of authority. And you like it down there in Boston?
Boston is excellent. If you've never gotten a chance to live in a New England community, that's exactly what it is. It's a community. And not only have I seen that in the way that we treat others and they treat others here and how they respect others here, but it's been very welcoming. Not only at my workplace, I was very welcomed, but just in general to the city where I live, the town where I live, which is Brookline, which is just outside of Boston. Everybody's very friendly and very helpful, and I think that's that embodies what Boston Strong really is the strength within this community.
That is fantastic. Antonio Caban, he was the producer at News 10 ABC when everything was going on. He is down in Boston and giving us a snapshot of how the city has come back, and he's also a St. Rose alum. Antonio, always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. So I want to thank you for listening to the conversation here on Radio St. Rose. You can listen to this as well as past shows by going to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Radio St. Rose Conversation. Until next week for the conversation, I'm Blaise Bryant.